Welcome back, everybody. It's Mike Steiner with Jesus Without Religion. Today, we're going to be talking about some branches. We're going to be talking about some branches that we see in John chapter 15 that apparently they're not producing fruit. And the end result is that they are being cut off. They're being cut off and they're being thrown away is sort of what we're seeing here. We're going to talk about are you those branches? And if you are those branches, are you being cut off? And hopefully it's just a short little video today, but I'm really hoping that we can all walk away with a better understanding of what's really going on with all of these branches. So let me pop in here and share a quick screen with you so we can look at some slides together. Bear with me one moment, folks. Here we go. All right, so here we go. This is the verse we're talking about. This is John chapter 15, verse 2. You know, a lot of people read John 15:2, which this is what it says. It says, he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does not bear fruit, he prunes. So people will read this and they'll ask us, whoa, obviously they're a little concerned there. Does this apply to Christians? I mean, is God cutting off Christians? Are we those branches and then throwing us away if we do not produce fruit? So there is a problem here that I think we need to ask ourselves, and we have to sort of dig through this. The verse in John 15:2, it just identified this person as every branch, and I quote, in me. So does this then mean that the Christian who is in Christ is now being cut off and they're going to hell? Just a quick side note too, I want to make clear that some translations actually use the word take away. But anyway, the majority of us, thank God, we do not believe in salvation, including most Bible commentators and translators. So many of these guys, unfortunately, they get to this verse and with good intentions, I think they try to explain it by twisting it and possibly giving it a different meaning. But for those of us who do not believe that Christians can lose salvation, we certainly would come to this verse and say, whoa, how do I reconcile this? However, I don't see how anyone can get away from this translation, meaning that a Christian who stops producing fruit is cut off. And in that context, if we're taking it that way, thrown into hell. But what if the Bible translators simply just did a poor job of interpreting the Greek word into its true context? Folks, would not be the first time, and many Bible commentaries have changed their language over the years. It will continue to happen again because they've realized they could have done a better job at translating. And one example is that word scourge. That's another video that we did on that, but let's go ahead and slide on over here. So here, the Greek word here is airo, and it can be translated as cut off. It can be translated as remove, or I believe more correctly as take up and to raise. So what you're looking at right now is a screenshot from my Strong's Concordance. This is not my opinion. This was my research. When I came to this verse, I too question it because it doesn't fit with the rest of the gospel as I see it. So in context, what this verse really should be saying is he lifts up every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes. The lifting up of branches actually causes them to start to produce fruit again. This was a common practice for a vine dresser to stretch the vine on an arbor or use some other means of raising it to the air and sun. The recipients of this letter, who got it, by the way, in the Greek, they would have understood what was actually being said in this verse. So I want you to note it's not our fruit, right? We often think that, oh, yeah, I'm not producing fruit. I'm terrible. I'm a bad guy. It's the fruit of the Spirit. That's why verse 4 tells us, get this, we can't bear fruit on our own. Apart from Christ, you can do nothing. So a millionaire can give away all of his money, and that's not bearing good fruit because God is not looking at. And I'm talking about an unbeliever in this case, right? Unbelievers do all kinds of good stuff, but God would say it's not good fruit. And oftentimes Christians do good things that are nice, but it's not coming from Christ in us. Sometimes we're just trying to find stuff to do because we think we'll please God. Well, the fruit that God's talking about is Jesus working in and through us. I'm going to pause for a quick second, just a real quick example of what I'm trying to say. Years ago, I remember, gosh, this is like maybe even 10 years ago now. I felt like, man, God, you haven't used me for anything big in a long time. And business is doing well. I'm making money. I start driving down the road and I've got a wad of cash. And I'm like, I can't wait to find some homeless guy and I'm going to knock God's socks off. I'm going to go way above what most people would do. And I'm going to give this guy a wad of cash, a ton of money. So here it is. I run into this homeless guy. Here it is. This is my fruit. Hey, buddy, here you go. Sorry, you're homeless. Like, terrible, terrible situation to be in. Get yourself a hotel room, good bite to eat, man. And right away, I'm thinking, God, boy, he must be so impressed with the fruit that I'm bearing. Well, I'm telling you, God doesn't need me to help this guy out. God was not impressed because what was going on that day was not Jesus working in and through me. That was not his fruit. That was me pounding my chest going, look at my fire, God. Am I the bomb or what? But wouldn't you know it, at that very moment, this guy just starts talking and it just grabbed me. I mean, I could tell this guy was lonely. All this guy wanted, and he was truly homeless. This wasn't some guy standing out there just trying to rake in some money and then go to his house. This guy was genuinely not mentally really there. Very, very dirty, really tore my heart apart. And this guy absolutely, more than anything, more than any of that money I gave him, I swear to you, this guy wanted a friend. He wanted someone to talk to. And, I sat down, I put my hand on the guy's shoulder, and I swear I was in a big rush that day, but I ended up sitting there for, I think like an hour and a half. And in the end, this guy's crying and he just says, thank you so much. No one ever sits and talks to me. And I just really, the guy could not say thank you enough. You could tell it was such a big deal. Look, God knows, thinking back now, I wish I'd have done even more. But at the end of the day, I knew the fruit that was coming from God. It wasn't the money that was coming from Mike trying to impress God. The fruit was love. The fruit was patience. The fruit was Jesus in and through me saying, no. What this guy needs is you. He needs a human being to sit down and say, I care. Tell me about your life. Tell me about this. So there was no amount of money that was going to impress God. So anyway, I just wanted to share that story with you. I just to hopefully give you a little bit of an illustration of your fruit and God's fruit. And again, the fruit being inspected is always God's fruit. So that's why verse 4 tells us we're not even able to bear fruit on our own because you don't have the ability to do it. And let me take it further. Not only is it impossible for a Christian to bear good fruit on their own, but according to Matthew 7:18, it's literally, and we'll come back to this, it is impossible for a good tree to bear bad fruit. But wait, we all sin, right? And again, we're going to come back to that because clearly we have bad deeds, but we cannot produce bad fruit. Again, the short takeaway is it's not your fruit. Now, I would be doing you a disservice if we didn't talk about the first three words in the verse, in verse 4 that say, remain in me. There's a lot of people out there that are teaching this word remain as some type of an outward human effort. So we're going to go ahead and tackle that right now. First, let me point out that you're not the only one doing the remaining, okay? Notice and I in you. So Jesus is also remaining in you. So this isn't about something I'm doing. This is something that we're both doing. The word remain is also translated as abide. Now, again, people are taking this word abide and they're turning it to an outward work. Abide simply means to live. I abide in Chesapeake, Virginia. I've made my abode in Virginia for more than 20 years. So perhaps a better way for you to understand what remain in me and I in you means might be to say that we are living in Christ and Christ is living in us. So first, let me say this. It is impossible for us to stop remaining or living in Christ. As far as Christ living in us, let me remind everyone that God said this. He said, I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. That's Hebrews 13:5. Now, again, the key word is never. God is abiding in you. So he's not saying, I'll never leave you or forsake you. But man, if that fruit slows down, I sure will leave you and I sure will forsake you. See, we've got to look at this. Hey, there's conflict. So what's going on here? God said, when you are faithless, when you're not faithful at all, when you are faithless, God said, hey, I'm going to remain faithful. 2 Timothy 2:13. So again, what's the deal here? God, are you going to remain faithful when I'm faithless, if I'm not producing fruit? Which one of these am I supposed to buy into? Now, then we start to see this unexpected statement in verse 6. Now, it says this, if anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown away like a branch and dries up, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. So, fair question. Is this Christians who suddenly don't have a lot of works and are being thrown into hell? Now, after all, aren't we saved apart from works? So are we saying, hey, we're saved apart from works, but then right after you get saved, God is going to toss you into hell if you don't have works after you got saved? I really don't believe that's what's being said. It is important to note that what God does with the Christian who may not temporarily be producing fruit. God did not cut the guy off that we just read about in the earlier verse. The proper translation was that God raised him up. He lifted him up and caused him to produce more fruit. This person that is not abiding in Christ in this verse, chapter 6, he is not a believer. Keeping in mind that God said, I will never leave you or forsake you. He's talking about a believer. God definitely is leaving this person in verse 6 because this guy does not abide in Christ. And you can't remain in him because he was never in Christ and Christ was never in him. So good news. If by chance we good trees are not bearing good fruit for a time, we're not going to be cut off, but rather we are going to be lifted up. I do want to close by pointing out what Jesus said about Christians. Before anyone tries to conclude that John 15 is about a good tree producing no fruit and then being cut off, I would strongly encourage you to look at Matthew 7:18, which says this. It says, a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. In other words, it is literally impossible for you, a Christian, a good tree, to bear bad fruit. But wait a minute. Now, we all sin, don't we? And at times, we don't have a lot of outward fruit. So how can all of this make sense? And the answer is very simple. We are overly obsessed with thinking this is about our fruit that's being inspected. And he's not talking about our fruit. This is the fruit of the Spirit, which is why apart from Jesus, you cannot bear fruit. right? God is referring to the things that Jesus does in and through you. Again, my fruit, what I was doing that's not being inspected, was the money I tried to give the homeless guy. God wasn't impressed. God's fruit was the time, the love, the attention, the patience, the kindness. That was the fruit of the Spirit working in and through me. Yes, I was the vehicle, but that apart from Christ, God would not be impressed with anything that I did that specific day. All right. So once again, I hope you all enjoyed today's study, and perhaps you feel a little more secure in your faith, knowing that, well, you're never going to be cut off from Jesus Christ because he will never leave you. Why? Because he is absolutely faithful. And as always, folks, if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will consider liking it, sharing it, and commenting below. And God bless you all.